Hello, this is the Quetzal, the tier 8 season tank for this season. I've done this video twice already and it's 42 minutes long, which was too long, so this time I'll try go a bit quicker. You can get this tank for free this season by being quite active, but you can't get it fully upgraded. You'll have to spend money to do that, and my advice to you is don't. Unless you want to get the Argonaut, this tank is not worth getting fully upgraded by spending money. It is absolutely not worth it. And because its stats are so bad even when fully upgraded, if you get it stock free this season, sell it. Get yourself 1,000 gold and go buy one of the similar tanks which I'll compare it to. They're pretty fun, pretty good tanks with a similar sort of traits as the Quetzal. But getting right into the armor profile, sorry, not there. You'll see, so I'll give you a rating very quickly of what this tank has. The armor is the best aspect of this tank. The gun is bad, but it's not the worst aspect of this tank. The mobility is terrible, and it is the worst aspect of this tank. And on that note, the armor being the best aspect, compared to all tanks in tier 8, all heavy tanks, the armor is just average. It is nothing special. So with that out of the way, let's have a look. So against 225 AP, you will see this view. You can see its upper plate and turret are both very strong, and that is the case. Upper plate is 320 to 390. That can bounce tier 9 premium ammo. The turret cheeks are 300 to 410 at the very top. 300 is good enough to bounce almost all tier 8 heavy tank premium ammo, so that is very nice. But you'll see some issues with it, and that is evident in this view here with Blitz kit. So the tank is covered in weak points all over the front. You can see here the eyes at the top, sort of eyes, are weak points. Even this tiny little bit above the gun, that's a weak point. The areas to the left and the right of the gun are weak points. These areas, right at the top of the hull are weak points. The areas at the bottom, right above the tracks, are weak points. This little triangle on each side of the tank, which is this thing, that is also a weak point. These parts are all weak points, and of course these two hatches and these slits here are weak points. The lower plate is also very weak. This won't bounce even tier 7 tanks. Its side profile, you can see, is pretty decent. That side armor is 89mm thick. It does have some weak points when you're side scraping. For example, right here, that's only 160. If enemies know to shoot there, then they can penetrate you in a side scraping position. But other than that, this will bounce, and I'll show that here. That's the 53 TP with 122mm gun and 225mm of AP penetration, and it bounces in this sort of a view. So now going to premium ammo, this is 265 APCR, and the nice thing about this tank is when enemies change to premium ammo, they might expect to be able to penetrate the upper plate or the turret cheeks, but they can't because it is just solid. And you can see that here. All that changes about the armor profile is the area around the gun. Of course, when your turret is turned to the side as well, that does become weak to premium ammo. But now, looking at the gun depression view, this tank has 7 degrees of gun depression, which is okay, but it's not great because it is very tall. Compared to when it's on flat ground, there's no changes really. On the AP view, the standard ammo, the areas around the gun are still weak, and then when you switch to premium ammo, there's a bit more penetrable areas which are around the gun. All of these small weak points on the hull and turret are still penetrable, and of course this area on the sort of middle area of between the upper and the lower plate is flat, and that does come up quite tall on the hull. One more thing to note is this little area down here, which was shown here when you're side scraping. That is penetrable because enemies view the armor like this when you're using gun depression, and you can see that here. If you take the gun and go like this and look at that, you can penetrate right there, like that. And if enemies shoot down here, they can just go right through the tracks as well. So there's weak points on the side where the tracks are. Next, going into the gun. This gun is very mediocre. It hasn't got any good stats. 340 on AP is actually pretty nice. Most guns, well, this is a 110mm gun. There are many 105mm guns in tier 8, and they do 310 alpha damage. So this does have a bit of an advantage over those guns. 290 on heat, that's pretty average. 420 on HE is pretty nice, but not that great. Reload time 9.9, that's the same as the Kyla, which has 10 more alpha damage, giving it 2069 DPM. That's low for only having 340 damage on AP. Penetration is decent on AP, 215, that's on the lower end, but it's not bad. Heat is 250, that is bad. Because it's heat ammo, it struggles to go through spaced armor and through obstacles on the map. And also 250 is just low penetration. So you need to use calibrated shells on this tank. HE is quite nice, that is slightly above average. Aim time is bad. It is 4.6 seconds if you have it equipped like this, or 4.3 seconds if you have it equipped like this. That's bad for having 340 alpha damage. Aim time is low. Base aim time. This is more similar to sort of Soviet heavy tanks or tanks with 400 alpha damage. That is very low, very poor aim time. Dispersion is decent for its alpha damage because many tanks with 310 alpha damage only have slightly better dispersion at 0.344. So its dispersion is okay. Gun handling is poor. These two are just a bit below average, and this is quite a lot below average. Many tanks on their turret traverse have 0.12 or 0.14. Gun depression, as said, this tank is tall, so 7 degrees is okay, but you have to take into account how tall this tank is. Mobility is where this tank falls down. As said, this is the worst aspect of this tank. Top speed 30, that's low, but it's not terrible. Reverse speed 11, that is the lowest in tier 8 for a heavy tank. It is the same level as the KV4 and KV5, which are the slowest reversing tier 8 heavy tanks. Acceleration is actually pretty decent, 12.4 on hard terrain and 9.5 on medium terrain. That's not bad at all for the type of tank that this is, which is a bit more like a super heavy tank but with average heavy armor and gun, which is kind of what the Kyla is like. And you'll notice it weighs 121 tons, to be exact 120.69. Terrain resistances are actually pretty decent for a heavy tank. But the big thing here, traverse speed, 20.9 degrees on hard terrain and 16.1 on medium. It's hard to tell you how bad this is, especially if you don't know traverse speed numbers in the game, but basically there has not been any tank ever which has had slower traverse speed than this tank when it is fully upgraded. The best you can get this tank to is 22.18 on hard terrain. That is the best possible traverse speed, and that is worse than the majority of heavy tanks in the game, period. If I get, let's say, an average heavy tank sort of marker to be a reference point compared to the Quetzal, and that will be the IS-6. We can see here traverse speed on hard terrain, the IS-6 has 31.6. Again, this represents an average heavy tank. The Quetzal has 18.7. On medium terrain, the Quetzal has 14.4, the IS-6 has 25.3. Remember, the IS-6 represents an average heavy tank, it is not a fast heavy tank. 25.3 is more than, well, it is basically 11 degrees traverse more than the Quetzal. 11 degrees is a massive number. And these tanks next to it, you'll see, they aren't as impressive, but again, these are super heavy tanks. These are the slower tanks of tier 8, and they make the Quetzal look terrible. They look like medium tanks in comparison to the Quetzal. But it's hard to explain how bad this traverse speed is. You'll just have to see it in the gameplay. And the big problem with this traverse speed, I'll quickly explain it here, is that because you need to turn when you drive, you can't even get to your top speed easily, just because you have to turn when going places on the map. So you can't even really utilize your 30 kilometers top speed, and 30 kilometers isn't a high top speed. Similarly, traverse negates your hull armor, because you need to turn the tank to be able to point the armor at the enemy. If you can't turn the tank, your side is exposed, and then enemies can just negate your armor because your front isn't facing towards them, and you'll see that in the gameplay. And then if there's fast enemy tanks traversing you, then you can't turn the gun. This tank has both a slow turning turret and a slow turning hull. You can see that here, 21.87 on the turret. It means that if there's a tank going around you and you have to turn your hull and turret at the same time, they'll be able to outrun your gun very easily. And that's not just fast tanks. A faster heavy tank could be able to do that. So, coming back to the equipment, because I completely forgot to do it, the equipment choice I've gone for on this tank is calibrated shells. This is mandatory. You cannot play this tank without using calibrated shells, and that's coming from someone who loves using gun rammer. 250mm of heat on its premium ammo is just tragic. You can't penetrate many tanks in tier 8. For example, if there's a T-32 using its gun depression and its upper plate is exposed, 250 heat generally isn't going to cut it, so you need calibrated shells. Other tanks you might face a lot, Tiger 2. This tank doesn't have a lower plate weak point. If you don't have calibrated shells, you can't penetrate its upper plate, its lower plate, or its turret, even with heat. So you just need the increased penetration of calibrated shells to make that heat penetration actually usable in tier 8. Here it's 283mm with calibrated shells on, and of course this also helps the AP, which is 232, and that's pretty nice. Using this also means that you can actually damage enemy tanks. If you're using gun rammer and you can't damage an enemy tank, you can't penetrate them, what's the point of having that higher DPM? On most tanks that's not an issue because they have enough accuracy to be able to deal with the weak points, or they have enough penetration to actually deal with most tanks. But that's not the case on this tank. It doesn't have enough penetration to deal with the majority of the heavier tanks it's facing. Tier 9 heavies, stronger tier 8 tanks, hull down tier 8 tanks, they'll all be able to just bounce the heat ammo of this tank easily if you're using a gun rammer. So that's why you use calibrated shells. The other essential equipment piece is improved control. This increases your traverse speed, and as shown in the stats, the acceleration is actually pretty okay. Meanwhile, the traverse speed is the worst in game for any tank, so definitely use improved control. As said with the stats, traverse actually helps you to angle your armor, it helps you to catch enemy tanks who are going around you, and it helps you to just be faster overall in battle, especially when your other mobility stats are actually decent, so use improved control. The other equipment piece to be looking at is enhanced armor and improved assembly. I've tested this in the training rooms and with different levels of penetration. Enhanced armor is useless. This tank, has enough armor to be able to resist premium ammo, even from tier 9s. As you can see, the view doesn't change when you switch to premium ammo, and that's sort of the good thing about this tank's armor. It has a ton of these very weak points which cannot be enhanced, and its upper plate and turret are too strong to need enhancing, so don't use enhanced armor. Improved assembly is very good because it increases your hit points to almost 2000, which is among the highest in tier 8. And finally, vertical stabilizer or refined gun. Now, there's two sides of this argument, and both are equally valid, really. And I'll just get them here. So, for the argument of vertical stabilizer, your aim time is terrible. You aim very slowly for not having really that high alpha damage. Your mobility is so bad that you have to always be moving in battle. Basically, your traverse is so bad, you're always turning, and it's causing your acceleration to be slower because you're always turning, so you're basically hardly ever sitting still in battle, especially in a brawling situation. So vertical stabilizer is better to make your aim time more usable because you're always moving. On the other hand, there's the argument that you're too slow anyway, so you may as well not use vertical stabilizer, since how slow you are, you won't feel the aim time or gun handling, which are bad, nearly as much as a faster tank, or as they seem on the stats. And it is true, on the stats they look like terrible stats, but in game you don't feel it as much. They don't seem as terrible as it says on paper. And refined gun will improve your accuracy in all scenarios, even when you're sitting still hull down, which vertical stabilizer doesn't do. This only has a use when you're moving or after you have stopped moving. So which one you choose is up to you, but the one I use in the replays, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is this setup. And quickly before going into the replays, I'll just show you guys the stock tank. So you can see on the left is the fully upgraded tank, on the right is the stock tank. I won't take time to explain it because I did this video and it was 42 minutes long, but you can see its stats are much worse, except for this one. That's not actually a hard stat, that's an effective sort of stat for your accuracy based on how slow you are, and this tank is much slower, as you'll see here. Its traverse speed is absolutely abysmal. Essentially, if this tank is stock, not fully upgraded, don't play it, sell it. And here is another comparison. I have these three tanks, which I believe are the most similar in terms of their traits, their armor, their gun, and their mobility in tier 8. I won't compare every single stat, but I'll say if you want to know how bad this tank is, go to Blitz kit, go to the compare tool, add in the Kyler, KV4 and KV5, and then have a look at what these tanks offer over the Quetzal. Also, don't forget the KV4 has an engine power boost. But you can see here more DPM on these tanks, and again, Quetzal needs to use the calibrated shells, that's why it has more than the KV4. It's got slightly better aim time than these two, but worse gun handling than most. Its mobility is much worse than all of these tanks. Its acceleration is better, but it has just terrible traverse, and its hit points are really the only redeeming feature. If we look at its armor, we can see that it's not even that impressive. Note that the KV4, this is a tech tree tank, right? This tank is free. You can get this tank for free in the tech tree. Why would you pay money to get this tank fully upgraded when you can get a KV4 for free in the tech tree? And that's not saying the KV4 is a good tank. KV4 is pretty mediocre for a tier 8 heavy tank. It's just that shows how bad the Quetzal is. And of course we have the Kyler, a great premium collector tank, and the KV5, a very fun tank with very troll armor, as you can see with its side and its front. Basically, if you want to see yourself, get the Kyler, the KV4 and the KV5 in a comparison with the Quetzal. I don't want the video to be too long, so I'll just get into the gameplay. Hopefully it's not going to go over 42 minutes again this time. So notice the mobility here. I'm starting in a straight line, so my acceleration is able to take effect. It still takes me a while to get up to 30 kilometers, and you can see I'm actually only doing 25 here. And I turned there and it went down to 23. The reason I have a speed boost is for traverse speed. Because this tank traverses so slowly, sometimes you will have to turn the hull and the turret to get to an enemy on the side. So I have that speed boost for that. Here you can see a full-on move shot. Because I was moving so slowly, my bad gun accuracy stats didn't actually come into too much effect. And now you can see the terrible traverse speed. That was using the engine power boost, and I did that because I thought there was an urgency to get over to the other flank, as it doesn't seem like there are many tanks on my side. The Tiger II makes a bad shot there. That shouldn't have bounced. My whole side was showing to him. So that was just a bad shot by the Tiger. But here you can see the use of calibrated shells.
Enemy armor is damaged.
If I didn't have calibrated shells, I would have no chance of dealing with this Tiger II, but because I have that 283mm of heat, I can actually easily penetrate his upper plate, and also of course his turret. There you can see I'm in a side-scraping position, which, as said with the armor view, this tank can do pretty well in side-scraping, if enemies don't know about the small weak point.
Enemy vehicle destroyed.
And now I have to turn again. Look how slow this tank is. Of course you can continue driving forward while turning, however it makes your traverse speed slower. So in that case I just stopped to turn and then decided to accelerate up to top speed from basically standing still. And that's a situation where you have to think about sort of average speed. I'll talk about this tank compared to the VK100 and 168 in a minute, but consider the average speed of this tank when it is moving around in battle. You can see here I'm already turning my hull away from the TS5 because I know how slow this tank is. And now look at this. I'm trying to aim for the Ferdinand, but I turn my hull away from him to try and get the turret to actually aim on that tank in time. Well, for the damage, as in this battle there wasn't an urgency, I just wanted the damage. But you can see in that situation, because the turret turns so slowly, I had to turn the hull as well. And because my hull was facing just in the wrong direction, I had to face my main armor away from the Ferdinand to be able to shoot him. And that's the big problem with having such a slow traversing tank. Of course not every situation will be like that, but there are some which come up where you will notice it. And in that battle I did 2,400 damage, blocked 1,700, but remember the Tiger II bounced off my front somehow when my whole side was exposed, and the Ferdinand and the Super Hellcat somehow missed my giant lower plate. So 31,000 credits is not bad. I wasn't using any credit booster in this game, and of course because it's 10v10 you don't get any medals for extra credits. So it does make okay credits, the usual enriched sort of status of a collector tank. Well, a reward tank in this case.
Move out.
So here I start quite far back on Hellas because this is 10v10. And you can see that in a straight line, which this will be, you can actually utilize your top speed. Here I am now going at 30 kilometers per hour, and I'm actually able to get to the front line just barely after my allies, which started much further forward than me. In this situation, I have decided to rush the heavy flank because you can't do anything else in this tank. You're large, your armor frankly isn't that impressive, it's average for a heavy tank, and you're extraordinarily slow, so you don't work anywhere else than the heavy flank. If you go to the medium flank, enemies will just use their great accuracy to snipe your weak points, shoot your lower plate, and also flank around your side, and then that's where the problem really is because you can't turn. So here I'm sitting hull down. It's unfortunate that enemies all don't decide to shoot at me because I can't really show you the armor working. In fact, in neither of these games did I show you the armor working, but I will publish another video where it's gameplay only with no commentary, where I do get into a sort of brawl where the armor is shown. But here you can see I'm just using the gun's rather mediocre DPM to sort of shoot enemies when they come out. And here is where the problem is. I poked out sideways. What else could I do in that situation? This tank's traverse is so slow. I couldn't side scrape on this rock over here because I just turned too slowly to be able to do that. I couldn't turn my hull to angle towards the WZ because, again, I turned too slowly to do that. There's two other enemies in front of me. So poking out sideways and just hoping the WZ somehow misses or bounces is really the only option I was left with, and with my full hit points I could afford to do that.
Enemy armor destroyed.
But that's the problem, this tank turns very slowly. If I turned faster, I would have tried to angle my hull so that the WZ bounced off me. But this tank turns so slowly, I didn't even try to turn the hull. But here you can see this is the sort of situation where the tank works fine. It has the armor of a regular heavy tank, so it can deal with a situation. Its hit points are nice, so I was able to take the shot from the WZ and really not worry about dying at all, as I was on full hit points at that time. In this mid sort of close range and going at such slow speeds, the accuracy and aim time are fine. As you can see there, full on move shot on the Pantera hit just fine, and that's because I'm so slow. And here you'll see the 121 ton weight. I ram the Pantera for 150 hit points.
Enemy armor is hit.
And then do a little bit more ramming as I kill him. But you won't get to use that ramming in many situations because this tank is like, it turns like a boat basically. You can go forward, but if enemies move even slightly, you can't turn to adjust and try and ram them. You're stuck on the path that you've chosen, and that is the case in gameplay as well. You have to plan where you go in this tank because it's so slow. Where you choose to fight is where you either win or you die. You can't relocate, you're just too slow to do that. In that battle I did a bit better, 3000 damage, 225 was by ramming. I got 46,000 credits, so again, without a credit booster, it's okay. But yeah, the Quetzal. This tank is bad. It's, I would say, the worst tank in tier 8 that I have played ever in this current meta. There aren't really worse tanks. Some people may say the T-28, the American tank destroyer, is bad. No. Compared to this tank, there aren't really many worse tanks in the game actually, tier for what this tank just lacks. So its armor is average. It's not special, it has a ton of weak points, but it does have pretty red armor on the front, so that's okay, it's average. Its mobility is tragic. There's no balance. This tank is unbalanced in the bad way. Why is the mobility so bad? It's not because this tank has great side armor, because if it did, it might make sense for why this tank turns so slowly, but it doesn't. The tank has average armor with just the worst possible mobility. And compare it to these two tanks, which go 20 kilometers per hour, they're actually a lot more mobile than the Quetzal, because they can actually traverse, and they can turn their armor to enemies, they can actually relocate in battle. Yes, their top speed is 10 kilometers worse, but they make up for it by not having to stop and turn for 20 seconds. And of course the gun, it's mediocre. It's got bad stats in all areas, but they're sort of okay if you use calibrated shells, and because your mobility is just that bad that the accuracy and the gun handling can't take full effect. But this tank's not worth it. It's bad. If you get it and it's not fully upgraded, sell it. And if you do fully upgrade it, still sell it. I don't know why you would play this tank over a Kyla, a KV5, or the KV4 you can get in the tech tree. If you want to suffer, at least suffer in a better tank. So really, the Quetzal, not a good tank. I don't know what Wargaming is thinking by balancing it in such a way, or not balancing it because it's that bad. Hopefully they buff it in the future so it's at least a bit better or it has a purpose. But right now, it's a garage slot tank. You can get 1,000 gold for selling it. I would definitely do that, especially as you have to pay money to get its top modules. But yeah, that's the Quetzal. I'll do the Argonaut soon. Thanks for watching.